The morning they fired me, the building smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner, the way it always did when someone in facilities had been reminded to cut costs. I knew something was off before I even got to my desk. My manager, Darren, was standing by the glass conference room with HR, Laura from People Ops, holding a folder like it weighed nothing. Darren wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept adjusting his watch, tapping the face like time itself was the problem. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice level. "What's going on?" Laura gave me the corporate smile that never reaches the cheeks. "Can you step in for a quick conversation?" The words were polite. The tone wasn't. I glanced around. A couple of people were pretending not to look. One of the junior analysts, Noah, had frozen mid-sip, eyes wide like he was watching a car crash in slow motion. I walked into the room anyway, not because I trusted them, because I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hesitate. Laura closed the door. Darren sat. I stayed standing. Laura opened the folder. I expected a performance plan, maybe a warning, maybe some sudden restructure. We'd been hearing that word for weeks. Restructure, optimization, headcount alignment, all the ways companies say someone is about to lose their livelihood. Instead, she slid one page across the table. A termination letter. "Effective immediately," it said. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I read it like I was reading someone else's obituary. "Can you explain the reason?" I asked. Darren cleared his throat. "It's staff reduction." I stared at him. We were a client-facing revenue team in Q4, with a flagship account in active renewal negotiations. The idea that I was redundant wasn't just insulting, it was illogical. "Staff reduction," I repeated. "On the Northbridge account?" Darren's jaw tightened. "The work will be redistributed." That was when I understood. Not the reason. The plan. They didn't want to redistribute my work. They wanted to redistribute my relationships. Northbridge wasn't a casual client. It was the kind of enterprise account that paid for entire departments. It was the account you didn't hand over to someone new just because you wanted to show leadership. And I'd built it. Not with flashy presentations. Not with executive golf outings. With the slow, boring things. Fixing missed deliverables before they became escalations. Taking late calls when their procurement team panicked. Translating their technical complaints into something our product people could actually solve. I'd become the person they called when they didn't trust anyone else. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the vent. Laura tapped the page. "We'll need you to sign acknowledging receipt." I looked at the line where my signature would go. My first instinct was to argue, to ask for severance in writing, to demand an explanation that wasn't a vague insult. But I'd learned something in corporate life. When someone wants you gone, arguing doesn't change the outcome. It just gives them material. So I signed. Darren exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Laura slid another sheet across. "This is the separation agreement. There's a standard severance package if you sign within 7 days." "Standard," I said, eyes scanning. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pay for 6 years of building a book of business they'd bragged about on earnings calls. There was also the non-disparagement clause, a confidentiality clause, a clause stating I wouldn't contact clients on behalf of the company. That last part sat there like a locked door. I looked up. "So I'm not allowed to talk to Northbridge?" Darren leaned forward, voice low like we were discussing something immoral. "We'll handle client communications." "You mean you'll handle the transition?" He didn't answer directly. That was answer enough. Laura stood. "Security will escort you to collect personal items." That sentence, escort, was the one that finally made my stomach tighten. I wasn't a threat. I wasn't angry in that moment. I wasn't even loud. But they were treating me like I might steal something. Or worse, like I might tell someone the truth. 2 minutes later, a security guard I'd nodded to for years was walking beside me like I was a stranger. People watched from behind monitors. Some looked away. Some stared. Nobody said a word. I didn't blame them. I'd been them. You see someone getting walked out, and you think, If I speak up, will they remember my name next? At my desk, I grabbed what fit in a small box. A framed photo of my dad, a coffee mug from my first client conference, a notebook full of messy meeting notes and timelines that I suddenly realized were worth more than my laptop. Not because they were secret, because they proved what I'd done. Laura waited near the elevators with the same empty smile. Your access will be terminated within the hour. You'll receive instructions on returning equipment. I nodded once. Okay. Darren avoided eye contact again. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. The last thing I saw was my badge reflecting in the metal panel, my face behind it, like a person already fading. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. I walked to my car, set the box on the passenger seat, and sat there for a full minute without starting the engine. My phone buzzed, a Slack notification, then another, then nothing, because the app kicked me out. Logged out, credentials revoked. I opened my email, same thing. I tried to call Darren, straight to voicemail. I tried Laura, straight to voicemail. I tried the department line, automated message. This mailbox is not accepting calls. That was when it hit me. They weren't just letting me go. They were ghosting me while I was still in the parking lot. And I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel something dark rise in my chest. Not revenge. Not yet. Just the sick realization that people I'd worked beside for years could flip a switch and treat me like a mistake they wanted erased. I stared at the building. Then I did the only thing I could do that still felt like control. I opened my notebook, the one I'd grabbed without thinking. On the inside cover, I'd written a simple list months ago. Names, titles, numbers. Not for drama, for work. Because when you manage a major account, you keep track of who matters. At the top was one name. Marissa Klein, Northbridge Procurement Lead. Under it, direct line. I didn't dial it. Not because I didn't want to. Because the severance agreement was clear. Don't contact clients on behalf of the company. And I knew how that game worked. They'd love to claim I interfered. They'd love to paint me as unstable. So I put the phone down. I sat there, breathing slowly, trying to think like a professional and not like a wounded animal. And that's when the second realization landed. Quiet and sharp, if they were ghosting me this hard, it meant they were scared of something. Maybe not of me, but of what would happen if the client asked a simple question. Where did he go? I started the car. As I pulled out of the lot, my phone lit up again. This time a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in me, some instinct that had saved projects at 2 a.m., told me to answer. I picked up. Hello? A woman's voice, tight and controlled. Is this Ethan? My grip on the wheel tightened. Yes. This is Marissa from Northbridge. My throat went dry. She didn't sound confused. She sounded angry. And then she said the sentence that made my stomach drop. We've been trying to reach you all day. Your team is acting like you never existed. What is going on? And before I could answer, she added, quieter now, almost like a warning. Because if they think we're renewing without you, they're about to learn how wrong they are. But that was just the beginning. I didn't answer Marissa right away. Not because I didn't have words, because I had too many. The honest ones, the angry ones. The ones that would feel good for 3 seconds and cost me for 3 years. So I did what I'd trained myself to do in conference rooms. I controlled my tone. Marissa, I said, calm enough to sound professional, I'm not ignoring you. I was separated from the company this morning. There was a pause, not a polite one, a dangerous one. Separated, she repeated, as in fired? Yes. Another pause. Then a sound like she'd exhaled through her nose, short and sharp. Okay, she said. That explains the behavior. What behavior? I asked. They're pretending you don't exist, she snapped. I asked Darren for you by name. He said you were out of office. I asked for your direct line. He said he'd circle back. Then someone in their finance department emailed us a revised renewal schedule that doesn't match the terms we agreed on last month. I felt my jaw tighten. Those terms weren't casual. We'd spent weeks negotiating timeline, discount brackets, implementation support. There were internal approvals, red lines, and one very specific condition Northbridge cared about. Continuity. They didn't want a rotating cast. They wanted one person accountable. Me. They changed the schedule? I asked. Yes, Marissa said, and they removed the service credit clause you promised in writing after last quarter's outage. My fingers went cold on the steering wheel. That clause was the thing that kept them from going to a competitor. It wasn't a huge dollar amount, but it was symbolic. We admit we messed up, and we'll make it right. If Darren was stripping it out, he wasn't just being sloppy. He was trying to rewrite history. Marissa, I said carefully, I need to be clear about something. I'm no longer employed there, and I can't act on behalf of the company. I didn't ask you to act on behalf of anyone, she replied, and I asked you to tell me the truth. That hit me harder than it should have. Truth in corporate life is a rare currency. People spend years learning how to avoid it. I don't know what they told you, I said, but yes, my access was terminated this morning. I've been trying to get answers, and they're not returning calls. Marissa went quiet again, and when she spoke, her voice was lower. This is not good, she said. We have our CFO, legal counsel, and procurement in a room in 30 minutes. Your VP requested we streamline communication through him. And now you're telling me they removed negotiated clauses. I pictured Darren standing with that folder like it was nothing. I pictured Laura's smile. They weren't streamlining. They were taking my work, my paper trail, and my credibility, and hoping the client wouldn't notice the switch. Marissa continued, if you're not there, they don't have the institutional knowledge. They don't know why those clauses exist. They don't know what we escalated last year. They don't know the promises they made to keep us from leaving. I swallowed. Do you still have the emails? She asked. The question wasn't illegal. It wasn't asking me to steal anything. It was asking a human question. Do you still have proof you weren't lying to us? I have my notes, I said, and I may have copies of some approved red lines if they were sent to my personal device, which I'm not sure. Marissa let out a harsh breath. This is unbelievable. It gets better, I said, and I heard the bitterness slip through before I could stop it. They offered me 2 weeks severance with a non-disparagement clause, like I'm supposed to smile while they erase me. That's insulting, she said immediately, like she didn't even need to think about it. I leaned back in the seat. My car was parked now, some side street near a grocery store I didn't remember driving past. I'd pulled over without realizing it. I stared at the dashboard like it might give me instructions. Marissa spoke again. Ethan, listen to me. This renewal is not small. If this goes sideways, there will be consequences on your side. I don't say that to scare you. I say it because I've watched vendors self-destruct when they get arrogant. I rubbed my forehead. I don't know what you want me to do, I said quietly. I want you to join the call, she said, not as their employee, as the person who negotiated this. I want you to confirm what was agreed, because right now they're gaslighting my team in real time. My stomach tightened again, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was irritation, hot and clean, because that was the trap. If I joined, Darren could claim I was interfering, violating separation terms. If I refused, the client might assume I'd been the problem all along. They'd put me in a position where any move could be used against me. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing myself to think beyond the emotion. Marissa, I said, I can't just jump into a client meeting. They'll weaponize it. So what? Your plan is to let them rewrite everything we agreed on? She shot back. Her anger was justified, but I also heard something else now. Pressure. She was in the middle of a room full of decision-makers, and the person she trusted had been removed like a loose thread. I didn't blame her for pulling hard. I took a breath. If you want my help, I need you to do something first. What? I need you to send me, right now, an email from your corporate address that says you requested me specifically to clarify prior negotiations, that you're asking me personally, not the company, that you're aware I'm no longer employed there. Silence. Then, that's smart. I didn't feel smart. I felt like someone trying not to drown. I'm not trying to start a war, I said. I'm trying to protect myself while telling you the truth. Marissa's voice softened slightly. Okay, I'll send it. Also, I added, the irritation sharpening, I need to know what Darren is saying about me. Is he implying misconduct? Performance issues? No, she said. He's just avoiding your name. Like it's inconvenient. That was worse in a way, because it meant they thought they could erase me without even dirtying their hands. Marissa's email came through 2 minutes later. Subject line, urgent clarification, Northbridge renewal terms. It was short, professional, exactly what I'd asked for. I stared at it on my screen and something inside me shifted. Not because I suddenly had power, because I suddenly had leverage. And then my phone buzzed again, this time an internal number I actually recognized. Darren. He was finally calling. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered, and before he could speak, I said calmly, Is this about Northbridge? He didn't even pretend. Yes, Darren said, voice tight. We need you to stay out of this. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the audacity was unreal. You fired me, I said, still controlled. Then you ghosted my calls. Now you're calling because the client asked for me. A beat of silence. Then Darren said the line that made my irritation turn into something colder. We're willing to offer you a consulting arrangement, if you don't make this difficult. I stared at the windshield, feeling my pulse in my throat. A consulting arrangement. Not an apology, not a correction, not accountability. Just a new way to use me without admitting they needed me. And I realized, with a clarity that scared me a little, they hadn't just fired me, they'd assumed I'd take it. And then, silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Darren's voice stayed steady, like he was offering me a coupon. Instead of trying to pull me back into a fire, he lit himself. A consulting arrangement, he repeated. Short term, just to smooth the renewal. We don't want this to get messy. I stared at the steering wheel, knuckles white, and felt something in me crack. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly, like a strand finally snapping after being pulled for years. You fired me at 9 a.m, I said. You had security walk me out like I was going to steal staplers. Then you ignored every call, and now you're calling because you're worried about messy? He didn't answer that. Instead, he tried to regain control with the one thing middle managers always reach for: vagueness. We can make it worth your time, Darren said, but you can't go rogue. You can't talk to the client without us aligned. There it was. The real ask, not help. Silence. Are you telling Northbridge I'm out of office? I asked. A pause. Too long. We're handling communication, he said. So yes. Ethan, he said, and I could hear irritation now. This is standard. People transition off accounts all the time. I almost laughed again because the delusion was impressive. This isn't a transition, I said. This is you trying to wear my skin in a meeting. That got him. His voice tightened. Watch your tone. I stared at the windshield, and I suddenly remembered a dozen moments that had felt small at the time. The way Darren would take my call notes and reframe them as his strategic insight. The way he'd introduce me as support in meetings where I was the only one who knew the details. The way he'd promise the client something and then ask me afterward, "Can you make that happen?" I told myself it was normal, that it was just the game, that if I stayed professional and consistent, eventually it would be recognized. But sitting there now, with Darren demanding I stay quiet after he erased me, the truth was too obvious to ignore. Recognition was never the plan. Extraction was. Here's what's going to happen, I said, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. I'm not your employee. You don't get to instruct me. He tried to cut in. You're offering because you're trapped, I said, and the words came out like a simple fact. And you're calling it consulting because admitting you need me would make you look incompetent. Silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind where someone is recalculating. Then Darren tried a new angle. Softer. Look, Northbridge is a big client. Everyone needs to be careful. If you get involved, you could put your severance at risk. My severance? 2 weeks. The number flashed in my head, and my irritation turned into something sharper. That severance is an insult, I said, and you know it. You're using it like a leash. That's not fair. It's accurate. He exhaled. So what do you want? That question should have made me feel powerful. It didn't. It made me feel tired. Because for years, every crisis had ended the same way. Me solving it, someone else presenting it, and the company acting like that was the natural order. I looked down at my notebook on the passenger seat. The messy handwriting, the timelines, the names. Proof of work that had been invisible until the moment it became necessary. And I realized something that should have been obvious much earlier. I was only valuable to them when something was about to break. When things were stable, they treated me like overhead. That was the moment I stopped wanting to be their hero. Send me the consulting terms in writing, I said. Rate, scope, timeline, and who's responsible if legal gets involved. Darren scoffed, just a slight sound, the kind people make when they're offended by boundaries. Come on, Ethan. No, I said. Come on, Darren. You don't get to improvise now. Another silence. Then he said, we can do a flat fee for the week. How much? I asked. He hesitated. 10,000. I stared at the dashboard, and for a second all I could think was, that's what I was worth to them for 7 days, only after they'd tried to erase me. 10,000 to walk into a room where you're pretending I don't exist, I said. 10,000 to save you from a problem you created. What number would make you say yes? Darren asked, voice strained, and that's when my phone buzzed again. Marissa. A text this time, short and blunt. They just told our CFO you're unavailable. He asked, did Ethan quit? Darren said, we've moved on. Call starts in 8. 8 minutes. I felt my chest tighten, not panic, but a kind of clarity that bordered on anger. They weren't just rewriting the contract, they were rewriting me. I typed back one line. I didn't quit. I was terminated this morning. I'll explain on the call if you want me there. Then I turned back to Darren. Here's the reality, I said. I haven't signed your separation agreement, and I'm not going to be threatened by a severance I haven't accepted. His voice sharpened. Are you going to tell them you were fired? I looked at the steering wheel again and felt that quiet brake settle into something solid. Yes, I said, if they ask me, because I'm done lying to protect you. Ethan, don't do this. It wasn't a request anymore. It was fear. I took a slow breath, and for the first time since I'd been walked out, I felt something like control, not because I could hurt them, but because I could stop carrying their consequences. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm just not doing anything for you. And then, very calmly, I added the sentence that changed the entire power dynamic. If you want me in that room, you're going to pay my rate. Sign an independent consulting agreement with indemnification, and acknowledge in writing that I'm not speaking as your employee. Otherwise, you can handle Northbridge without my name. Darren didn't speak for a full 2 seconds. When he finally did, his voice sounded smaller. Indemnification? He repeated. Yes, I said, because I'm not taking legal risks, so you can save face. I ended the call before he could respond. My hands were steady, but my stomach wasn't. I wasn't enjoying this. It wasn't satisfying yet. It felt like stepping off a ledge and hoping you'd built the bridge on the way down. I opened my email app and forwarded Marissa's earlier message to myself with a single subject line. Client requested me by name. Documented. Then I did one more thing that felt like closing a door. I searched my personal files for the last approved renewal red line Marissa had sent weeks ago. Not company documents, not internal decks, just the client's own attachment, something I was legally allowed to possess, because it came from them. It was there. And reading it, seeing my name in the thread, I felt the last thread of doubt snap. They could ghost my calls. They could erase my access. But they couldn't erase the paper trail. I looked at the clock. 5 minutes. And I realized with a cold certainty that the next decision I made would either save Darren or expose him. I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. I didn't have time to sit with the adrenaline. I had 5 minutes and a choice. Either I let Darren drag my name through a room I wasn't allowed in, or I walked into it on my terms. Marissa's calendar invite hit my inbox while I was still staring at the client red line on my phone. It was a standard video link, Northbridge hosted, with a note at the bottom. Ethan joining at request of Northbridge Procurement. That line mattered. It meant I wasn't inserting myself. I was being asked. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Ethan, a woman said, crisp and controlled. This is Dana Patel, corporate counsel for Apex Ridge. Apex Ridge. My former employer. Legal already. I almost laughed, but no sound came out. Dana, I said. That was fast. It needs to be, she replied. You've been contacted by Northbridge. Darren informed us you may join their call. Darren informed you, I repeated, after ghosting me for 3 hours. I'm not calling about that, she said, staying on rails. I'm calling to set boundaries. You are not authorized to represent Apex Ridge. You may not disclose confidential information. I'm aware, I said. I won't represent anyone. I won't disclose internal information. A beat. Dana's voice softened half a degree, the way lawyers do when they're trying to sound reasonable while holding a knife. If you join, we need you to confirm, in writing, that you're participating as a private individual at Northbridge's request. And we need you to avoid discussing internal deliberations. I can do that, I said. Send it. You're not requesting compensation? She asked, like the word tasted strange. I'm requesting clarity, I said. Compensation comes after you acknowledge reality. Silence. Then, I'll email you a short acknowledgement. Reply. Agreed. Fine. When her email arrived, it was exactly what I expected. Sterile, narrow, designed to protect the company. But it also did something Darren hadn't done all day. It admitted I was no longer employed there. Ethan Carter is not an employee of Apex Ridge. Any participation is at Northbridge's request and does not constitute representation. I replied, agreed. Then I clicked the meeting link. The screen opened to a conference room camera. Long table, glass wall, people in suits, Northbridge CFO at the head, legal counsel beside him, Marissa a few seats down, jaw tight. On the other side of the call, in a smaller tile, was Darren, too close to his webcam, collar slightly crooked, and above him, Victor Haynes, the VP of Client Success, wearing the expression of a man trying to look calm while a building burns behind him. They were mid-sentence when I joined. Victor was saying, and Ethan is temporarily unavailable, but our team has full coverage. Marissa's head snapped toward the screen. No, she said loud enough to cut through the politeness. He's here now. Victor blinked. Darren's eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second, like he hadn't believed I'd actually show up. The CFO looked at the camera. Ethan, he said, measured. Thank you for joining. We've been trying to reach you. I kept my voice calm. I understand. Victor leaned forward, smile forced. Ethan, glad you could make it. Just to clarify for everyone. Marissa cut him off. Before we clarify anything, I have one question. Ethan, did you quit? The room went still. Darren's tile didn't move. Victor's smile froze in place. This was the moment they were terrified of. The simple question that punctures all the corporate fog. I didn't look at Darren. I didn't look at Victor. I looked straight at the CFO. No, I said. I didn't quit. I was terminated this morning. You could feel it. The shift. The air leaving the room. The CFO's eyes narrowed. not in anger at me, at them. Terminated, he repeated slowly. And yet your VP just told us you were unavailable. Victor's mouth opened and closed once, like a fish hitting the wrong current. That's not what I meant, Victor said. We're in the middle of... Marissa leaned in. You told us you moved on. You let us think Ethan abandoned this renewal. Darren finally spoke, voice thin. Marissa, we didn't. Don't, she snapped. Just don't. Northbridge legal counsel, a man with gray hair and a pen he'd stopped tapping, looked at Victor. Mr. Haynes, he said, why was the primary negotiator for an active renewal terminated without notice to the customer? Victor tried to regain footing. Internal staffing decisions are confidential, but I assure you, continuity is not a slogan, the CFO said, cutting him cleanly. It's a control. It's risk management. Marissa turned to me. Ethan, two things. One, did we agree to a service credit clause tied to last quarter's outage? Two, did we agree to the renewal schedule they just sent? I took a breath. This was where I had to be careful. Truth, without stepping into company confidential territory. Yes, on the service credit clause, I said. And no, the new schedule is not what we discussed. Victor jumped in. Ethan, with respect? With respect, Northbridge legal counsel said, colder now. You have already misrepresented his status. I suggest you stop interrupting the witness. You didn't expect to show up. Darren swallowed hard. On video, you could see it. I kept my eyes on Marissa. I can't speak for Apex Ridge going forward, I said evenly. But I can confirm what I personally negotiated with you. And I can reference the client red lines you sent me, documents that originated from Northbridge. Marissa didn't hesitate. Do it. I pulled up the PDF attachment, the one they'd emailed me weeks ago. On October 18th, I said, Northbridge sent the revised red line with Section 7.3 service credits reinstated. On October 20th, I confirmed acceptance on the call and followed up in writing. That clause was part of the version we were working from. Removing it now changes the risk allocation. Victor tried again, voice sharper. We can revisit that clause internally. The CFO stared at him. You already revisited it, without telling us. Silence again, heavy this time. Then the CFO said the sentence that made Darren's tile look like it physically shrank. Effective immediately, this renewal is paused. We are not signing anything until we understand why our counterpart was terminated and why you attempted to conceal it. Victor's face went pale. Darren's eyes dropped, like he couldn't bear the camera anymore. It wasn't dramatic revenge. It was worse for them. It was professional consequences. Marissa exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all day. She looked at me, and for the first time since the call started, her voice softened. Thank you, she said. That's all I needed. And that was the moment it hit me. Quietly, cleanly. They didn't own my reputation, they'd just been borrowing it. The call ended a minute later with Northbridge Legal, requesting a formal written explanation and a revised schedule. Once governance is restored. Victor promised follow-up. His voice sounded like a man reading from a script he no longer believed. I clicked leave. My car was suddenly too quiet. Then my phone buzzed, 3 times in a row. A text from Darren. What the hell was that? A missed call from Laura in HR, and an email from Dana Patel with a subject line that made my stomach tighten. Executive review, attendance required. Because now it wasn't just Northbridge in a room. Now it was my company, behind closed doors, trying to decide who would be thrown under the bus first. By the time I drove home, the anger had burned off into something quieter, cleaner. The kind of calm you get when the truth has already landed and there's nothing left to perform. I didn't rush to answer Darren. I didn't call HR back. I parked, carried my box inside, and set it on the kitchen table like it belonged there all along. Then I opened the email from Dana Patel. Subject, Executive Review. Attendance required time, 6:30 p.m. Attendees, Victor Haynes, VP, Dana Patel, Legal, Laura Chen, HR, Darren Holt, manager. No apology. No hope you're well. Just a summons. I read it twice, then replied with one sentence. I will attend as a private individual. Please confirm in writing that I am not required to comply with employee policies or directives. 2 minutes later, Dana responded, Confirmed. Good. That confirmation was more valuable than Darren's entire last year of great work compliments, because it meant they couldn't pretend I was still under their control. At 6:29, I joined the video call. Victor's camera was on. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since the Northbridge meeting. Darren's tile was there too, shoulders tight, eyes darting. Laura sat perfectly centered in frame, hands folded. Dana was the only one who looked normal, because lawyers don't panic. They just measure damage. Victor started immediately. Ethan, today's client call was unacceptable. I didn't react. Okay. His jaw clenched like my calm was an insult. You created a material disruption, he continued. You embarrassed leadership in front of the client. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him hear himself. Victor, I said evenly. Northbridge asked if I quit. I answered honestly. Dana leaned forward. To be clear, she said, controlled. Did you disclose any proprietary information, any internal deliberations, pricing strategy, staffing rationales, or confidential communications? No, I said. I confirmed what I personally negotiated, using Northbridge-originated documents. Dana nodded slightly. That was the lawyer version of good. Laura jumped in next, voice soft and rehearsed. Ethan, we understand this has been an emotional day, but we need to maintain professionalism and protect the company. I almost smiled, but didn't. Professionalism? I repeated. Like ghosting my calls after terminating me? Laura's expression didn't change. Your access was removed for security reasons, as standard procedure. Darren finally spoke, and his voice was sharper than I expected. You didn't have to say terminated. You could have said you were transitioning. There it was. Not, you shouldn't have joined. Not, we're sorry. Not even we handled this badly. Just, you should have lied better. I looked straight at Darren's camera. You told them I was unavailable. Darren's eyes flickered. I didn't... Victor cut in impatient. That's not the point. It is the point, I said. The tone wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be. Calm is heavier than anger when people know they're wrong. Victor exhaled hard. Ethan, what do you want? Same question Darren had asked earlier, only now it didn't sound like negotiation. It sounded like containment. I leaned back in my chair. I want the record to match reality. Dana's eyes stayed on me like I was a witness stand she couldn't control. What reality? Victor asked. I spoke slowly, clean facts in order. Reality is, I was terminated without cause beyond staff reduction while I was the primary counterpart on a live renewal. You did not notify the client. You attempted to proceed as if I had simply vanished. When the client asked directly, I answered honestly. That's all. Victor's face hardened. And now Northbridge paused the renewal. Do you understand the size of the damage? I understand it perfectly, I said, which is why I'm surprised you didn't. Silence. Dana finally spoke. Victor, I'm going to ask a direct question. Who authorized the termination timing? Victor's eyes darted just once to Darren's tile. Darren's throat moved like he swallowed something sharp. Laura spoke quickly. The termination was approved through the standard workflow. Dana didn't even look at her. Workflow is not a person, she said. Who? Victor's jaw tightened. It was recommended by Darren. I approved it. There it was. Darren looked down like his desk had suddenly become interesting. Dinah continued, voice level. And who authorized external client communication strategy? Specifically the statement that Ethan was unavailable. Victor opened his mouth, but Darren blurted, I didn't say it like that. Dana's eyes snapped to him. Did you represent to Northbridge that Ethan was merely unavailable, rather than no longer employed? Darren's face went red. He hesitated too long. "That's a yes?" Dana said quietly, writing something down. Victor leaned forward, and for the first time his voice lost its executive polish. "This is turning into a witch hunt." Dana looked up. "This is turning into governance." Then she turned back to me. "Ethan, do you still have the signed separation agreement?" "No," I said. "I signed acknowledgement of termination receipt. I did not sign the separation agreement." Dana nodded again, smaller this time. "Understood." Laura tried to steer the meeting back to HR territory. "Ethan, we'd still like to offer you the severance package, provided you sign—" I interrupted gently. "No." Laura blinked. "No?" "No," I repeated, because that package was written as if you did me a favor. 2 weeks severance doesn't reflect 6 years of performance, and it doesn't reflect the risk you created today by mishandling a major client. Victor scoffed. "So this is about money." "It's about accountability," I said. "Money is how corporations measure accountability." Dana didn't flinch. "Ethan, what terms would resolve this?" I had already thought it through on the drive home, which is why I sounded calm when I answered. 3 things, I said. 1. A written statement to Northbridge acknowledging I was terminated and confirming the negotiated renewal terms we had agreed, including the service credit clause so they stop assuming I was the problem. 2. A consulting agreement if you want me involved in the renewal, my rate, scope, indemnification, and a clear end date. 3. A revised separation offer if you decide you still want me fully disengaged, one that reflects what you're asking me to protect. Victor stared like I'd spoken another language. Dana didn't. She simply nodded once, like this was the first rational thing she'd heard. All day, Laura tried one last soft push. "Ethan, that's not typical." I kept my voice even. "Neither is firing your client lead and pretending he disappeared." That was the moment Darren finally cracked. Not emotionally, but strategically. He leaned forward, voice fast. "He's doing this to punish us. He's enjoying it." I looked at Darren for a full second. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because you assumed I'd stay quiet. You assumed I'd be embarrassed and grateful for crumbs. You assumed you could wear my work like a jacket." I let the pause sit. "Today was the first time I watched you face a consequence you couldn't delegate." Dana exhaled softly, then spoke like a gavel. "Victor," she said, "I'm advising we proceed with Ethan's framework. We need to stabilize Northbridge. We also need to address internal exposure created by misrepresentation." Victor's face tightened, then reluctantly, "Fine." Darren's eyes widened. "Wait!" Victor cut him off. "Enough." And just like that, the power shifted. Not to me, but away from Darren. The call ended with Dana assigning next steps. Written client communication within the hour. A draft consulting agreement by morning, and this part was almost casual. A review of managerial decision-making regarding Darren's recommendation and communication conduct. When the screen went dark, I sat in my kitchen for a long moment, listening to the quiet hum of my refrigerator. No victory music, no dramatic speech, just something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. My phone buzzed once more. A new email from Marissa. Subject, "Thank you. Next steps." Her message was short. "We paused the renewal pending your company's written correction. For what it's worth, you didn't look unprofessional. You looked honest. Let me know if you decide to consult independently. Northbridge values. Continuity." I read that line twice. Then I closed my laptop, looked at the box on my table, and realized the ending wasn't me begging to be taken back. It was me choosing what I was worth. They ghosted my calls after firing me. Then the client asked for me by name. And in the end, it wasn't my job they couldn't replace. It was my credibility.